Welcome to Post Doom, regenerative conversations exploring overshoot grief, grounding, and gratitude. I'm your host, Michael Dowd. And in this conversation, recorded in March of 2023, I speak with Sandra Schoelles from Environmental Coffeehouse. I've considered Sandy a dear sister in this work for 5, 6, 7 years. And we finally got around to having this conversation. She and Jennifer Hines have actually interviewed me twice on Environmental Coffeehouse. And here I got a chance to ask Sandy questions that I've asked many, many others. And I'm delighted by it. And I think you will be too. Well, Sandy, I have been looking forward to this for a long, long time. I became aware of your work with Environmental Coffeehouse, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago, whenever it was quite a while ago, and have considered you just a precious sister in this work. We're almost the
Thank you.
same age.
Mhm.
And I actually apologize for not having you on sooner, because you are definitely one, you and Jennifer, but all the people that have been part of your Environmental Coffeehouse, but you've been really the spearhead of that. And so you've been one of the key voices in this, whether you call it the doomosphere or the sort of collapsology world or whatever, but basically people who get the big picture, who understand that things are stopping, or stopping, ending, collapsing. I like the word collapsing in real time. It's a slow motion collapse. So, it's not like a building collapsing. It's more like an ecosystem, or in our case, a biosphere collapsing,
Yeah.
and civilization collapsing. Also, not just promoting freak out and doom and despair, but really how to be heartful and engaged in meaningful work, meaningful action in light of that, with full acceptance of that. So I want to explore that with you. But anyway,
Thank
it's a
you.
delight to have you here.
Well, thank you. It is a delight to be with you. We have hosted you twice or
Yeah.
3 times
Yeah.
maybe.
I think maybe
Yeah,
3 times, right?
it may be, and it was a pleasure each
2.5
time.
years ago, I had a
Um,
post-Doom conversation with Jennifer, and it was
mhm.
wonderful, and it's been
Yes,
very well received. And so
yes.
I'm certainly open to the possibility of having a conversation with the both of you at some point in
Okay.
the future. What I'd like to start with is the question I've got, as you know, some questions on the conversation page of the Post-Doom website that I've really enjoyed asking all my guests, but I also like to pursue whatever it is that lights them up or concerns them or what they have passion for as well. But I do want to start with just the language. Like, okay, so I've been using the word post doom. In fact, I often
Mhm.
speak of post doom, no gloom. So,
Yes.
what language do you find helpful about speaking about our predicament, and do you find any resonance with post doom?
It's interesting. I find resonance with post-doom. I do, but language or any use of, language as far as labeling
Mm-hmm,
is difficult for me.
mm-hmm,
I like and understand collapse.
mm-hmm.
I understand doomerism or whatever you want to call it, but I am not one that just I don't follow any particular language. I'd say we are, a lot. The term that we like to the WASF little term, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a little comedic, but it's tragic at the same time.
Yes.
So language it's a difficult thing for me because again, I articulate what comes from my heart and not what comes from others. I learn from others.
Yes.
Others
Yes.
have made me who I am.
Yeah, that's clear for anybody who's watched, your programs on Environmental Coffeehouse. You draw out your hosts or your guests. You draw out your guests in ways that often spiral to really fascinating places.
No, it's about them.
Yeah, exactly. So the question that I first enjoy asking my guests is for people who aren't familiar with you, who they don't know, they may have heard of Environmental Coffeehouse but not spent much time there. They may have heard your name but not actually pursued that. So help us get you, like, anybody who's new to this and isn't familiar with you or your work, just share a little bit about how, sort of what you're passionate about. And I'll ask you in a few minutes more your story, your longer story, but really just help us get you here at the start, so
Okay.
folks who watch this can understand. Oh,
All right.
this is Sandy. Cool.
So I am a retired human resources professional. I was in higher ed research at a university in Buffalo. I got my interest in the so-called doomosphere, or the climate change collapse community, because inadvertently I had heard a video on YouTube by Hambone Littletail at the time. Now, I had already been doing Environmental Coffeehouse. It was a Facebook page, and it had very humble origins from the Bernie campaign, Bernie Sanders campaign. And I was asked to be with a group called Real Progressives, and we were following the campaign. I got to go to Washington, D.C. I interviewed people. I was doing things like Jordan Chariton was doing, only he was with TYT. I mean,
I don't know who Jordan
small.
is, nor TOIT.
TYT, the Young Turks.
Oh,
It's
right.
a
Yes,
political channel.
Yes,
and Jordan
yes.
Chariton now has Status Coup,
Yep,
and
I
he's
know.
doing phenomenal work.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Yes, and he covers amazing things that I could never have done. I'm very proud of him.
Yes.
But we were there in Philly in 2016. My role became post-retirement medically. I couldn't do a lot of things, so I started developing this Facebook page. No, what did I know? I didn't even know what a live stream was. I didn't even know what that was.
Right.
So I was given the opportunity to learn, and learn I did with Real Progressives. And then I decided it was going to be better, in my better interest, to do my own thing with this. And it started with this kid, Roger, and we kept thinking of names and what were we going to do. And Environmental Coffeehouse came out of it.
Okay.
And so we were a Facebook page for a long time. I live streamed. I learned how to live stream. And then we became a tour de force. I found Hambone. After that, I was like, oh my God, this man is saying things that are resonating with me and articulating thoughts I've had, but I don't know how to articulate. And of course, that led to Guy McPherson and Carolyn Baker, and on and on.
Yes.
And the voices that I was hearing in my head were totally different than the voices that I had previously heard, in the political activist realm. And nobody was talking about the fact that the techno-utopian world was not going to work. Nobody was talking about how serious things were. And then all of a sudden I realized, and it happened.
Yeah.
It happened.
Yeah. Amen. Well, I want you to actually, yeah. So now embody that, or embed that in a larger context of your story. One of the things that people have mentioned over and over again about these post-doom conversations, or post-doom no gloom conversations, is when I invite my guests to actually take however long they want to take, but share some of your own trajectory. Like, how were you raised religiously or philosophically? What was your worldview? Did you hold the idea that progress was sort of our secular religion? What shifted for you, and when? Were there any major books or mentors? And then sort of continue on with what you just said, and then also, where did Jennifer come into this picture, and you all came up, that sort of thing.
Well, one of my early books, believe it or not, that I really liked was Steal This Book by Jerry Rubin and Abby Hoffman's books. Okay, so back then as a kid, I was a Grateful Dead head. I was rebellious. I started riding motorcycles young. I was a Harley rider from a very young age. I think I was one of the only female Harley riders in my whole county. I was completely not a science-oriented person at all. The younger age. I was raised in just a traditional family, but you want to know the truth? I found out recently from my mother that, we've always been atheists, but I found out my father was a communist. And I recently interviewed my mother in
Oh,
Florida
sweet.
about this. Yeah,
Oh
she's
gosh.
88 years old. So, but that's going to be done a little differently. And believe it or not, I contacted David Hoffman, the filmmaker, about
Yeah.
my mom and about this. And they're going to help me do
Oh,
this.
sweet.
Yes, yeah, it's gonna be great for her. It's not gonna be
Yeah.
on Environmental Coffeehouse. So, I mean, I grew up. We moved to California from Yonkers. We were from the Bronx,
Mhm.
Yonkers. Moved to California,
When you
which
say
was
we, did you have siblings?
yes, I have two brothers, an
Okay.
older brother and a younger brother.
Okay.
We moved to California. My father had a job. He was in transportation. He was an engineer. He went
Mhm.
to Columbia and he went to NYU. He was one of those people that designed transit systems. Went to California. That was what he did. But I know that he was up against the fossil fuel industry because he was a mass transit expert.
Mhm.
And at that time in the late 60s, everything was now gearing to larger highways, cars, gasoline. My father was not about that. I
Sure.
mean, he wrote a book called The PCC Car. My father was a train nut and mass transit nut, was not happy with the urban sprawl.
Yes.
And he was a bit of a kook, my bio dad. I mean, I don't know how do you explain it? My father was nuts, but and he wasn't a very good father.
Yeah.
And as far as being, understanding how to raise children,
Yeah, sure.
he wasn't raised particularly well.
Yeah.
And so things happen, but I have never, ever, ever been a victim
Yeah.
of anything. And I will never let myself. So, yada, yada. We moved back from California. I grew up the rest of the way in New York in Westchester County. Ended up
Oh,
being very,
Westchester. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I live, Connie and I lived for about almost 3 years in Rockland County.
Okay. Well, I lived there. I lived in Spring Valley. I lived in Orangeburg. I
Oh,
lived a
sweet.
lot of places.
Yeah.
In my 20s, I did a lot of traveling and I ended up being with motorcycle clubs
Yeah.
and big ones,
Hmm.
an old lady, as
Yeah.
they
Right.
call it,
Right.
patriarchal as hell,
Yeah.
horrible.
Yeah.
I could tell stories that would put shivers up and down
Yeah.
anyone's spine, and I
Right.
have not done that
Right.
thus far in my life, really. Not the stories I have.
Yeah. Sure.
But I was able to live through a lot of craziness and which always made me stronger. And
Mm.
one of the things that was pretty funny is down when I was in Knoxville with my guy, and he was in this club. And these guys, because I was from New York, they called me the smart one. They called me Apple. I was allowed to drive the truck, the club truck. I mean, it was so patriarchal. It was horrible, but it was
Well,
some
it's just
kind of
that's what the
rebellion.
culture is, you
It was
know.
the culture, but it was a scary culture,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it could be terrifying.
Yeah.
I mean, I have stories that I've never told anybody, and I don't know when I'm going to tell them.
Yeah.
However, that's being said, I left that whole situation, went back to New York, and I decided it's time to go to college. That was it. Met my first husband, time to
Mhm.
go to college.
Mhm.
He was very supportive. And I started, and that was it. I always rode a bike. I bought my first Harley. I was 26 years old, blonde hair riding around. It was a big thing, the visuals,
Right. Of
because
course.
I've learned since then that I didn't have to be so crazy
Yeah.
about looking good, whatever, but that's the genre. That's
Yeah.
what I
Right.
grew up in. And it's tormented me, truthfully, through my
Mm.
life.
Mm.
But it's a tormenting thing when you're living in that society. I was a
Right.
bartender for
Right.
many years. You relied on your looks and your personality, you make
Hmm.
money. Got the Harley. My first husband, was very supportive. I kept
Hmm.
going to school, kept going to school. He moved us to Buffalo. My daughter was born. I was 29,
Hmm.
my only one. She's 34,
Hmm.
and moved to Buffalo. And every door opened in Buffalo that could have opened for me as
Wow.
far as my intellect uh, my being turned on, school, working in research, and that was it. I was very, very fortunate.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had a teacher, a professor. He was a psychology. That was my undergrad, and Dr. Blodgett. And he said one of the most important things that anyone could ever do for you is give you a job.
Mm.
And he gave me a $5 an hour research assistant
Sure.
job. And I quit bartending in
Yeah.
the New Year's Eve. My last job in a bar was 1995,
Uh-huh.
1994 to 95. So that was it.
Yeah.
And my scholastic academic career took off. I kept going to school and asked, I managed to change and go
So
into human resources.
yeah, so what were the at that time and then ongoingly since, because I'm also curious to hear how you sort of woke up to more environmental and ecological and climate concerns and stuff. But what was your passion or your study? What was your focus? You mentioned psychology, and human resources obviously is all about interpersonal relationships. Anything else you'd like to say about that period of your life?
In school, I loved the brain. I loved
Mm,
learning about the brain. I liked learning how which parts of the brain controlled what kind of behavior.
mhm,
I enjoyed learning about actual substance abuse. I knew a
mhm,
lot of people that had substance abuse issues.
mhm,
So I thought at one time I would go into being an alcoholism counselor.
mhm,
And then
mhm.
at that time I thought, oh, no, I don't know if I could do this.
Yeah,
I didn't know if I could do it because I might not have enough empathy. I
yeah,
thought. I
yeah,
didn't know.
right.
I was a bit on the angry side over people's
Mm.
inability to get their shit together when, geez, I did it. I did it. Being quite honest, I mean, it was a little bit of a judgmental thing,
Yes,
and
no, I get it.
I didn't want to be that, but there was dysfunction. I saw dysfunction all around me, and I wasn't sure that that was where
Yeah,
I should be.
right,
And I
exactly.
fell into human resources, but my passions, I always knew that things were not perfect.
Mhm,
I listen, since I was a child, Michael, in Yonkers, when we were living in a place where there was still some wetlands, still some
mhm,
place you could go and you could throw, rocks and play with pollywogs and all. And
mhm.
I remember at my youngest age when they started developing
Yeah,
that piece of land with houses. Why did that have to be
yes.
done?
Yeah,
So these things, they never left me.
right, exactly.
They just got pushed down
Right.
because I chose a rebellious, crazy lifestyle. But they got pushed down, but they reawakened,
Yes.
especially working in the research field.
Right.
And so I suppose that just led on to an inquisitiveness. But I knew about climate change, but the research that was most prevalent for my campus was Great Lakes.
Okay.
And we were learning about things like benzo a pyrene in the lakes. I worked with Dr. Sika's lab, which was chemistry and toxicology first before I became an HR, which that completely was not on my radar at the time. Uh, so I was very interested in the environmental aspects of pollution,
Yes.
and remembering driving down from Yonkers to my grandparents in the Bronx and seeing the smokestacks billowing crap along
Right.
the FDR
Right.
going to the city. So I always had it.
Yes.
It wasn't always at the top of my mind.
Yeah, right. No, of course. Yeah. Cool. So basically catch us up in terms of, so let's say from 95, 96, mid 90s until now, here we are in March of 2023. And what's been your trajectory? What's been your sort of the waves of awakening to our predicament, and that it is a predicament rather than a problem that can be solved and that sort of thing?
As I was in my career, I realized that it wasn't, uh, things were never pretty. the hierarchy in academia was not easy.
Mhm.
I was very fortunate to have a wonderful boss who championed females, and he male, but he championed
Yeah.
females.
Yeah.
But I saw that, what is it? The shiny object, doesn't always match, or
Right.
things are bigger in the
Right.
rear view mirror. And I knew that it wasn't, that nothing was as it seemed. And even with the toxicology and chemistry and the research that lab was doing, I knew that there were problems locally.
Yes.
And then we had one of our professors, he went to Vietnam to put Cambodia, it was, to work with the Cambodians to put leach fields in to clean their water. I
Mhm.
knew that people didn't have access to what we had. I've always known that we were privileged here in the United States, no matter where you're from, even somebody from, that lives in poverty in the southern part of the United States still had it better than people in Cambodia.
Yeah.
But it all depends. What is better?
Right. Yeah, I often remark how wealth is defined. In indigenous cultures, wealth is defined as the well-being, the vitality of the air, the water, the soil, the life upon which that culture
Yeah.
depended. And to define wealth in human-centered terms, as the wealth of, money or capital or assets or, kings and emperors or GDP or any of that is actually insane, because it ultimately destroys what gets called wealth, is actually destroying the real wealth, which is the underlying biospheric health and
Oh,
well-being.
you're right.
So even though Connie and I live below the poverty level, we feel like we're the wealthiest people on the planet. We are richer than kings.
I always was uh sort of materialistic, actually, and probably still am. And but I certainly don't have that kind of material anything. I'm on Social Security.
Yeah, sure,
You know,
sure.
I've screwed up my life so many times. I can't even tell you, but by screwing up my own life, I've made myself stronger and better.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
material things, if you want to go on to that, I did fall in the rat race,
yeah, sure.
Yeah, academia had its issues. Yes, there was a hierarchy. Yes, it was a patriarchy, unless to a degree it was. Uh,
Mhm, mhm,
but to drill down into the consumerism, I was a huge consumer,
mhm.
and I felt, and I didn't know how to identify the void I was filling by
Right,
buying shit,
right, right.
or getting hooked on television selling shows like QVC, or
Yeah.
getting that box in the mail, the adrenaline. So I knew there was something wrong there,
Mhm,
because I financially screwed it up the
mhm,
first
mhm,
time around in my first
mhm.
marriage. And I take full responsibility for all those things. But I knew that there was something wrong in
Yeah.
the constant barrage of commercials and telling everybody they had to consume, and the kinds of food products that were being manufactured. And I wrestled with my weight up and down on my life, because of what was available. So
Right.
I suppose it was a cadre of things. I used
Sure.
to have this I developed this, it was called the wheel of neurosis. And you spin the wheel of neurosis, and what would it stop on? Overeating, over consuming, biting your nails. I mean, it was just all of these things. And I felt like I fit into probably every single little thing it would stop on at one time in my life or another. So all of the looking at myself and looking at my behaviors, try to make myself a better person, sometimes was not always easy because of the people I was married to. We
Yeah,
also,
sure. Yeah.
but I managed to make it through and develop this whole environmental coffee house
Yeah,
Despite.
so say a little bit more about that, about the
Okay.
I'm going to use the word ministry, even though that you guys don't use that word. As you know, I'm an eco-theist, so I reject.
Yes.
To my mind, theism and atheism are in a neck and neck race to see which one can trash the biosphere more effectively. So I'm an eco-theist, meaning that for me, the universe is divine, Gaia is divine, and so we are, it doesn't matter whether we believe in the earth or not, but if we don't live in right relationship to the air, water, soil, and forests upon which we depend, then we're fucked, essentially. So talk a little bit about
Yeah.
what it is that you do with what you've done over the last, however many
Okay.
years. Give whoever's watching or listening to this conversation, give them a snapshot, a window into what you're doing, because I think it's holy work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Started out as a pipeline activist. And what was happening in North Dakota really opened my eyes, Standing Rock.
Yes.
And I started learning everything I could about pipelines, about the fossil fuel industry. I hadn't thought that much about it, actually. I listened to the ads that said natural gas was clean.
Right. Of course.
Thought I wanted natural gas.
Mhm.
I I knew though, that something always felt uncomfortable. And once I started learning about what was going on out there in South Dakota, how many miles I researched, thousands and thousands of miles of pipelines and the pollution that was coming from it. And well, that's how the evolution started, by thinking, but we still had people that had hope. And we had a contest one time on the channel, and I asked people, well, send in a buzzword or something that makes you feel good. And the woman that won, it was hope. Her word was hope at the time,
Yeah.
and it was heal our planet Earth.
Oh, that's good. I like
And
that.
so she was the one. And then I learned the word hope was kind of a dirty word, the hopium word,
Right. Yeah. Right.
hopium word. I learned that, and I realized, well, okay. And so we sort of changed our trajectory. And that happened when I interviewed Hambone Littletail at the time. That was way before Collapse Chronicles. When I interviewed him, the channel changed forever. And the people that got angry left. They were very angry at things he said, including my partner at the time who left. He was
Sure.
so angry because it's very hard to hear
Of course.
the words overpopulation.
Right.
And it's very hard to hear ecocide. And it's very hard to hear that we are destroying everything beyond redemption, beyond fixing, beyond anything.
And
And
yeah,
so,
yeah, and it's very hard to hear things like collapse and overshoot, which a lot of people
yes.
are not familiar with.
Absolutely. And they weren't. And most people did still have that hope that there was going to be a techno fix, that we're
Right.
going to get
Exactly.
off
Of course.
fossil fuels,
Right.
that they're going to stop the pipelines, that, yes, maybe we'll have solar panels and all. And I knew after I started on this path, which some people call a rabbit hole. I call it salvation,
Yeah. No.
even though
Exactly.
it's
I'm
not.
with you.
Yeah, it's not a religious thing. It
Right.
is a spiritual thing.
Right.
But I realized, wow, I'm able to look at all of this, all these issues from a vantage point that so many others can't. And it's not putting myself as I'm so wonderful or any of that. It's just that I got the ability, and I had this ability. I always had this innate ability to see this bigger picture in everything I did.
Yes.
Even in the biker lifestyle, I saw the bigger picture and I
Yes.
knew what was wrong. So this just went along with that pattern in my life, only this was seriously unreal, unbelievable,
Yes.
but it is what is happening. And you can't go back once you see it.
Right.
And you read the science. And I started reading research. I started learning about CO2. I started learning about all of the things that were happening in climate scientists. in climate science, started following climate scientists.
Right.
I probably Michael Mann was one of them, and
Sure.
a lot of them,
Right.
and then I found Carolyn and her work, Carolyn Baker,
Yep. Yep.
her work. 2017, I was fortunate. That's how I met Jennifer. Went out to Colorado, went
Mhm.
to the 3-day workshop with Dean Walker and
Yep.
Carolyn Baker, and it was really amazing for me
Yes.
because I thought I was dealing with something I needed a little help with. It wasn't like I could call my family and say, "Hey, can you help me? We're fucked. We're collapsing, whatever." I mean, my
Right.
family are invested in, people are working in the fossil fuel, not the fossil fuel industry, but the car industry. My
Yes.
father had a private plane. My real father
Right.
died. My stepdad had a private plane. It was
Yeah.
different. So, Environmental Coffeehouse became a place of inquisition. And the
Interesting word.
Facebook page, I populated it with articles. And then I brought on Jonathan O, who has been populating this page on Facebook for years. I don't do much of it. And now Poppy Davis does. Has 20,000 followers, but very rarely do you get more than 10 or 12 or 15 likes. And I've noticed also about human behavior, what people respond to, what they don't respond to, the attention spans.
Yes.
But it grew. And then
Mhm.
I found YouTube, which I had never broadcast on YouTube. And I started doing my interviews, and they started with political interviews,
Mm.
2018. And it was actually under the Off Fossil Fuels for a Better Future Act,
Mhm.
Green New Deal. I
Mhm.
thought these were the things that were going to
Right.
save us,
Right.
be the
Exactly.
panacea for all. And I learned that wasn't going to happen. So after I did those things, and after Hambone Littletail, I interviewed Guy McPherson, Kevin Hester,
Mhm.
Kevin Sandblum. I started learning from them
Yeah.
and creating my own brand, because everybody has their own brand. And I am not a cookie cutter, a clone, or anything. And I am a female in a male predominant
Right. Right.
paradigm here
Right. Right.
online. I mean,
Right.
there's Carolyn Baker, there was Gail Zawacki,
Right.
there is Jordan's wife, Karen,
Karen Perry. Right. Yeah.
Karen Perry. And then there's Sabine Hassenfesser, who is the physicist that does YouTube videos, but there's very few females.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jennifer
Yes.
just blew me away when I met Jennifer. That was it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
the bond between the two of you and the synergy, the way that you complement each other, and it's like there's a Connie and I, as I think I may have mentioned. So anybody watching this or listening to this, I've had two wonderful conversations with
Yeah.
Sandy and Jennifer. The first one back in February of 2021. The title of it is Teotihuacan, the
Yeah.
end of the world as we know it. Teotihuacan,
Boom.
a beautiful discussion with author and speaker Michael Dowd. And the other one, actually, I'm to this day so grateful because it's one of the only things that I've done where the host, the people that were inviting me to speak, namely in this case you and Jennifer, specifically to talk about William Catton's Overshoot
Yeah.
and the impact of that book and some of the key ideas in the book that I consider and Connie considers the most important book we've ever read. So that one was in
I
May
agree.
of 2021. So I recommend both of those episodes, not only because I'm involved with Sandy and Jennifer, but because the content's pretty damn good.
And
Um,
also, don't forget Frank Rodering's interview with William Catton that was done in 2008 or 5, I believe, that I edited and is on our channel. It's a magnificent piece with William Catton
oh,
himself.
I love that interview. I wasn't aware that you edited that, and I didn't pay attention that that's where it's on your
It's
channel.
it's
Thank
on my
you.
channel. It is William Catton, and Frank gave me permission, and it
Awesome.
is a beautiful piece.
Awesome. I highly recommend that. Yes. What would they what's like if someone were to Google that to find that?
Environmental Coffee House, William Catton Overshoot,
Awesome.
basically.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. That's great. Wow. Well, Sandy, I'm curious how what inspired, like what do you find particularly useful, either friends, colleagues in this movement and their work, or different authors, or any practices that you have? Like, how do you wake up each day with a sense of purpose
Purpose.
and contribution? How do you stay not depressed most of the time? I mean, obviously, we all, feel the full range of emotions. We feel grief, we feel sadness, we feel
Yeah.
anger, all of that. We're sometimes depressed, but you carry yourself, even, well, first of all, there's a humility that when you're not doing well, you're not afraid to say that publicly. And I
Right.
appreciate that in you. But also, how do you generally stay on purpose, or in a positive, or at least a place of compassion and contribution, in the midst of otherwise overwhelming and scary and difficult times?
Not an easy one.
Yeah.
I have a purpose, and that is other people, others bring their voices. So
Hmm.
Environmental Coffeehouse has become a place to bring voices. So that helps me, whether I'm reading someone's writing, whether I'm interviewing, having discussions, whether Jennifer and I are doing a show, that has become a focus.
Hmm.
I have, since I moved to where I am now, which is a very rural Amish community, I am a grower, gardener. I can my food. I'm a prepper, not a
Yes.
crazy, what you think, okay, I'm going to shoot, you're killing a prepper. Although I am an armed person, and I don't lie about it. I learned, my second husband taught me how to shoot. He could, you know, whatever. He taught me all this stuff, and that was another incarnation, another door that opened. So I garden. I I love growing food. I've on this journey, I've learned about all kinds of different things, mechanisms to feed yourself, to keep yourself whole. I live alone now.
Yeah.
I take care of myself. I never have to leave if I don't want, because I have enough food that I've grown from the last season. I do have help from local people that will come in
Right.
and help me, since I can't lift. My
Yes.
back is really disabled, but I get a
Mhm.
lot done. So that keeps me going, knowing that I have that. I have 6 rescue cats, which is a lot. They are, the sweetest little things. I had seen on Twitter that somebody had asked Elliot Jacobson, how do you feel about having a pet, having a captive pet in this time? And I thought about that, and I thought, well, my pets don't feel like they're captive, and I rescued them.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
it's not, I didn't go out and buy one. One of my early activist interventions actually was in the puppy mill arena in New York State, which
Mm.
is finally coming home after all these years. The governor did sign a law that is now going to stop puppy mills
Oh,
and
wow.
pet stores from selling animals like
Wow.
that.
Wow.
Hmm.
Well, you said something that I just want to quick share a story that I've never shared,
Okay.
uh, and that is, I don't know. I think Connie and I were on the Great March for Climate Action. We, in 2014, we basically allowed that event, that reality. It was an 8 month where 50 marchers marched from Los Angeles to Washington D.C., 14 or 15 miles a day. And so we were in our
Yeah.
van Angel, and we were speaking in churches and colleges and universities along that route. And so sometimes we were week or two ahead of the marchers, sometimes we were a week or two behind them. I was almost always speaking in the climate rallies in the big cities along the way. It was wonderful. But during that time, I think it was in Iowa. I think it was in Ames, Iowa, or somewhere.
All right.
But we were staying at somebody's home, and I had a UPS, or some package delivered to Amazon, whatever, and it came next door. It was sent next door by accident. So I walked over next door down this long driveway,
Hmm.
and on the door there was this little sign, and it had this like badass looking woman. It wasn't a picture of her; it was a sketch, but it said, "I have no estrogen and I have guns,"
Oh, wow. That's pretty heavy.
and
I
it
have
was
no
so.
estrogen and I have guns. Woo!
It was awesome. So you reminded me of that. I haven't thought of that story
Reminded
in a
you of
long
that.
time.
Hey, I
Uh,
like to target shoot in my backyard. I'm not a killer.
yeah, no,
I've actually over another thing is I've become for the most part a vegetarian. I won't say I'm full vegan
yeah,
because I find that that's hard to do, although I'm almost there.
yeah.
Almost there.
Yeah, I don't have a moral thing that people should do this, should do that.
Right.
If everybody in the world did this, these kind of positive things.
The would, should, could. Right.
Yeah, in my world, it's too late for those kinds of things to make any systemic difference. But what I sometimes say is those personal lifestyle choices, they're not going
They
to
feel
save the
good.
world, but they might help save your soul. That is, they might help you pass the mirror test and feel good
Yeah.
about yourself and that sort of
They
thing.
do feel good, but
Yeah,
I also don't like factory farms, and
absolutely.
I could see them go the way of the wind and not shed a tear.
I'm totally
And
with you on that.
I live in an Amish area, and they all
Yes.
raise animals, but they are, you know, well, actually, recently there was a neighbor of mine who built a gigantic barn. It's gigantic, and I'm pretty sure they're doing veal cows in there.
Mm,
And I don't even want to go
yeah.
over.
Right. Yeah.
And I was told by my other Amish neighbor that they're very humane
Yeah.
and that they sell to California, believe it or not.
Mm, yeah.
So Californians are hiring our Amish neighbors to sell them veal cows. So I don't like any of
Well,
that.
well, what I sometimes say is, don't worry, it'll all be over soon.
Ugh. And that's a hard one. I have a 34-year-old.
Yes.
She will never have children. She never wanted kids. She told me when she was 15, she said, Mom, I am not a breeder. And she's kept to that. She's never gotten married
How
because,
old was she when she heard your conversation with Hambone?
oh, she was already 20s.
Because that might have influenced her. But
No, she knew
oh yeah,
this.
yeah,
She knew this a long time ago. And now I look at her and I'm like, well, why would you want to get married? Everybody's divorced.
yeah. No, well,
Now I'm on my second,
and young men are so. I mean, the proportion of young men, those from say,
Mhm.
let's say, 20 to 35 or 20 to 40, are there's just a large percentage of them that are either addicted to internet gaming or internet porn or both, and they don't know how to relate, uh, you know, to women in terms of building oxytocin and that sort of thing. But that's a path I don't want to go down. So
No.
I do want to ask you also about somebody else who's really had a very positive and pretty profound impact on my own understanding of meteorological reality, and that's Nick Humphrey.
Nick.
So how did you encounter Nick? Because I know that
Okay.
that you and Jennifer have done work with him.
Mhm. Nick is part of our team. He'll be with
Yeah.
me Friday night
Oh,
on
sweet.
March 24th, depending on, I don't know when this is going to air.
Right.
But Nicholas, I crossed paths with Nicholas on Facebook on the near term human extinction groups.
Yep.
And Facebook has a huge presence of people that are involved in NTHE. There was an NTHE love group at the
Hmm.
time. Um, there's Sam Carana.
Hmm.
There's Arctic News.
Hmm.
Nick was in the same circles,
Yes,
and
exactly.
Nick is really bright. And I was like, well, I've got to have him interview him. And we just started to develop a team. He came back on just as Antonio Reed, who was the
Yes.
youngest one.
Yep.
Antonio was 26 at the time he started with us, maybe 25. And I met him through Sam, Sam,
Yeah.
uh, because he had found that channel as a young kid.
Right. Right.
But Nicholas was just the learning from Nicholas about meteorological events, about weather systems. That's where I learned a lot
Yes.
of my information, which I didn't know. And so
Yes.
meteorology is just, it's fascinating. It
Yes.
is. and he's still our go-to.
Yeah, no, well, I want to mention anybody watching this or listening to this conversation, just go to SoundCloud or just Google SoundCloud Nicholas Humphrey or
Yeah,
SoundCloud meteorologist Nick Humphrey. I forget how I have it, but I've audio recorded, I think a dozen and a half of his
that's
posts,
great.
including and actually posted the audio of his abrupt, I think it was done in 2019, but his,
Yes.
I think, hour-long program on abrupt climate change is to this day one of the most helpful overviews of
I
abrupt climate change.
I agree.
Yeah.
And we have many, many interviews. We had, before he started his PhD program, we were doing what we called on Environmental Coffeehouse, the State of the Planet,
Yes.
where Jennifer, myself, Nicholas, and Antonio would
Yes.
do our shows. Antonio is the one we go to for IPCC, all things
Mhm.
IPCC. Uh, but Nick also, was very interested in IPCC, but he would explain to the audience what was going on and why was an atmospheric river happening, or why was the jet stream broken, things that I never would have
Right.
thought about, things I wasn't inquisitive about until I realized the weather was changing and things were pretty screwed up.
Yeah.
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 So Nick is just a gift.
Yeah.
Fell in our lap, all of
Yes.
our lap.
Yeah.
He's a
Beautiful.
gift for all of us.
Amen.
Yes.
Amen.
Amen.
Yeah, no, he's great. In fact, there was a period of about, I don't know, close to a year, 8 months, a year, where we scheduled a once a month call just because I just love the man and I
Oh,
respect his mind and heart and
yes.
it was great and yeah. So
He has a beautiful heart, and he will have his PhD in disaster management, which is absolutely perfect for him
yes,
because he understands the big picture
yes,
and he doesn't compartmentalize things, but he's also coming from a place where he understands the demographics of those who are affected by the
yes,
climate crisis the most. And it
yes,
certainly isn't you, and it certainly isn't me.
yep, yep,
Okay. And he understands the global south, and he understands what's happening and who are being affected down there, where we up here, even in the worst storms that are happening in California still, and it's not a comparison, it's just an
no,
understanding.
exactly, exactly, yeah,
Nicholas gets it.
yeah, I totally agree. Well, Sandy, I want to ask you, in last, say, year and a half, I've sort of taken a turn in terms of my own ministry, my own post doom, no gloom work, and
Okay.
have really been focusing on some of the differences between collapse awareness and collapse acceptance. In fact, in my most recent video, which I consider my best and most
I
pastoral or my
listened,
most
of course.
supportive, Sanity 101, living fully in an age of decline, essential wisdom for hard times. And I say probably at least four, maybe five times in that video that collapse awareness is hell. Only acceptance transforms lives. And so that I wondered if you have anything to say in terms of your own sort of evolution from simply being aware and depressed or aware and like whatever the feelings were there, and has collapse acceptance and overshoot acceptance, um, how has that manifested or showed up in your own life?
Collapse awareness is hell, if whatever hell is for you,
Right,
when you
exactly.
first get into it and understand the enormity of the problem, of population, of food production, of pollution, of industrialization, consumption, and
Yes.
using up of non-renewable resources. I mean, it is huge.
Yeah.
But you can't stay. At least I couldn't stay there.
Yes.
And of course, meeting you and working with you helped a lot.
Mm.
Carolyn Baker helped a lot. Dean helped a lot to get to the post feeling, to
Yes.
understand its acceptance. I have no choice but to accept that I cannot change. I have the wisdom to know the difference.
Yes.
And so that's where I am. And
Yeah.
the day to day, I get depressed sometimes. I
That's
mean,
right.
I lost a cat. I still cry over the little kitty.
Yes.
I of course I blame myself. I should have seen this. I should have done that. I'm very good at blaming myself for things. And I know, intellectually, I can't really blame
No, sure.
myself. It happened. But acceptance is freeing to
Yes.
a degree.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't know if we communicate that as accurately as I would like on the channel. There are a lot of people we've brought in to Environmental Coffeehouse that are females that had no clue, that were as clueless as I was.
Mhm.
And we brought them down this path of awareness, but acceptance. I do think with us,
Yeah.
to so that they can also live good lives. And I consider that the life I live, and that I am grateful and fortunate to live, to be able to grow food, to be able to have this property that I have, to be able to live where I am. I would like to hope that gratitude can translate to others, because
Hmm.
again, it's not about me.
Hmm.
It's about the people that come. It's about the chat. It's about who I interview. It's not about me. They know me.
Yes.
About them, and how can we take an experience, even like last night's show, where I went over Sam Carana's latest on suicide. We are in the
Right.
suicide. We are out of the whole Anthropocene. And instead of making it frightening and scary, we just talk about, okay, what does it mean? Where do
Exactly.
we go? What do we do?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I noticed, I even remarked to Connie when I read the Suicide post, I thought, I think this is the first time that I can remember that Sam Carana, and again, whether Sam Carana is an individual or a
Right.
personification of a collective, it doesn't matter. But it's the first time that a post under the name Sam Carana ended without our situation is dire. We need to do the plan. I thought, wow, that's great, because I sometimes roll my eyes at that. But in any
But
case,
I like the biochar. I'm still in the
yeah, no,
biochar group.
exactly, exactly,
There are things, biochar, the growing. He had a climate plan. He, she, hit
yeah, right,
whoever. But Sam will show up on the shows as
yes,
Sam Carana in the chat. So there is a human being, one human being
yeah,
that is responding to us.
yes,
And
correct,
but Sam had a plan, and there are others that still do. There's a plan called the Windy Day concept. There's the Mears Project. And you know what, Michael? What I'm never going to do is tell people not to do it,
I
because
agree,
we cannot stop them. I
yeah,
am not a techno utopian. I mean, I obviously have, the computer, the monitor, I have the software. Thank you to the generous people that donated to the channel, which I am forever grateful, because I
yes,
never could have done it without them. Uh, we all know that no matter what, it could buy time. It could help, especially the Mears Project, the way they talk about that this is not necessarily to help the, spoiled brats of the global north, but this could help people that are really suffering.
yeah.
And so I'm hoping to have Dr.
Yeah.
Yitao on in
Yeah.
May.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. That's great. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't mean to be disparaging, because I do
No, you
sometimes,
weren't.
yeah, I do
You weren't.
sometimes refer to those who have a plan, that if we all enacted this plan, and I refer to them as planmeisters, but that doesn't mean in first of all, anything that we can do that promotes ecological integrity, social
Yes.
coherence, and personal wholeness is, in my world, a good thing. What
Yes.
degrades or destroys or condemns ecological integrity, social
Right.
coherence, and personal wholeness, that's evil. That's not to be pursued. So I actually appreciate the thoughtfulness of these kinds of plans, even though when I step back and realize that, oh, technology is one of the main drivers of
It
ecocide,
is.
these plans are not likely to work. And yet, nonetheless, I'm grateful that they're being put out in some aspects of it. And as you say, things like biochar, or anything that we can do to improve the health of our soil, as my wife Connie Barlow does, assisting trees in
Right.
migrating, is gonna at least increase the odds, the possibility that some trees will make this bottleneck, make it through this bottleneck. So yeah.
Wouldn't it be nice? Because trees are another thing I'm obsessed with. And
Oh,
that's how I
absolutely.
found Gail Zawacki, because
Yes,
she had her website. She talked about the trees,
exactly.
and it was eye-opening.
Yes.
And she has passed.
Yes. No, I know. And in fact,
And
I think I first encountered her through, I forget which channel, Sam or Hambone, but through that window is where I
mhm,
first encountered
yeah.
Gail, and it was like I started reading a lot of her stuff, and I remember there was something, I forget, we had some interaction where she sort of got pissed at me, and I don't remember what that was all about
My
now,
gosh.
but yeah, deeply valued her contribution and her writings. Yeah,
And we feel sad for the loss, but I can't help feeling sometimes when people pass that they're the lucky ones.
yeah, oh yeah, no, I
And
understand.
it's a difficult it's difficult to reconcile. They're the
Yeah,
lucky one because they're not here still witnessing, yet I'm not ready to go anywhere.
yeah, no, exactly.
And so who am I to say that they're the lucky one?
Yeah,
I'm not. I can't.
yeah, I'm
But
living literally 2 blocks from my soon to be 3-year-old granddaughter. As long as I can be of
right.
service to my daughter, my granddaughter, my son-in-law, as long as I can in some way contribute to the world in a way that seems to be making a difference for at least individuals or, small groups, that gives me joy. It gives me
Yeah.
something to live for, that I feel privileged and grateful that I get to do that.
And we've talked about kids, and we've talked about grandkids, and it's a tough subject
Oh,
because
it
most of
absolutely is. My
yeah.
son chose to not. I mean, he got a vasectomy before they got married, and he and his bride have chosen to not have children for a variety of reasons. Overshoot only being one of them, but they want to be of service to the world, and didn't feel that calling, as it were, to bring a child, especially in these interesting, crazy times.
Yeah, I think that would be the hardest decision. People always say, "Well, you're a breeder." Yeah, 34 years ago. I mean, it was the 1980s. I was a clueless moron. I mean, what did I know?
Yeah,
Nothing. I knew that we were polluting. I knew, but I didn't know. And then I didn't know.
yeah, no,
And I
exactly,
I didn't even know if I wanted any kids.
right.
But my husband at the time wanted one little girl, just one little girl, he said, and actually they have a phenomenal relationship.
Yeah, that's great.
And
That's great.
so, yeah, it is.
Well,
We're
Sandy,
all we're all healthy. We all have a
oh,
good relationship.
yeah.
We all hang out. Yep.
Yes, that's great. Yeah, I'm off the charts grateful for the relationship that I have with my children as well. So, bringing this conversation to a close, anything you'd
Mhm.
like to share that we didn't cover, that we didn't touch on, that you'd like to?
Oh, boy.
Um,
Well, I'd like to see more females get recognition that are talking about this. And it is, as an older female, I know that it is not exactly something we're not going to be watched by 35-year-old men. I'd like to see some more younger females have these conversations and understand the collapse and post collapse, and it could be happening more than I see it. I'm not on Twitter as much as I was anymore. I found it very toxic, and it was actually
yeah.
interfering with my mental health. But I would like to see more females.
Mhm.
Jennifer and I are stalwarts, but we don't we don't have enough of the female voice
Well, and many
in
females,
this.
certainly the younger females, I'm thinking of my conversation with Britt Ray, and there's been several others
Yeah.
where they're doing phenomenally important,
Yes.
great work, and yet they're still like taking hits on the hopium pipe in ways that I don't think are helpful.
Because they're but it's not see, but we're not in them. We're not
No, I
living
understand.
their
Yeah,
experience. So you can all you can do is open people's eyes. You can educate.
yes,
Education to me is very important. And then it's what the people, the
exactly.
followers, the watchers, the viewers, it's what they do with that in their own life. And yeah, there are phenomenal people, but I just don't think there's enough female voices that are recognized.
I agree. And one of the other criticisms, genuine, legitimate, right on the money criticisms, is that I haven't had enough indigenous voices involved in my post Doom No Gloom series. I'm actually envisioning the possibility of doing just a completely separate thing specifically
Wow.
with indigenous voices, but we'll see.
That would be wonderful,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah,
I would
no,
love that. Yeah.
yeah, no, me too.
I don't know
Well,
what
yeah,
else,
anything that you'd like to say to bring this conversation to completion, and then in terms of where obviously people go to Environmental Coffeehouse, but any other resources that you'd like to recommend? Any,
well,
yeah, any. You've mentioned a number of friends and colleagues and books and stuff, but
Jim
anything, yeah.
Massa.
What's that?
Have you
Yes,
interviewed Jim Massa?
Jim. I have not interviewed Jim, and
Okay.
yeah,
Well, then after me, I think Science Talk with Jim Massa. Jim is incredibly talented and knowledgeable in what is happening in our oceans as an oceanographer based in Fairbanks, Alaska. I will promote people that I think are worth promoting because that's
yes,
what I want to do. I want to
exactly.
promote others. It's not about me. I never wanted to make it about me.
Hmm.
And sometimes, it is,
Yeah.
but it really isn't. So the books are opening, put it that way. The chapters are now being written
Yes, exactly.
that weren't written 5 years ago, 10
Right.
years ago. So I guess that's it.
Well, Sandy, it's always a joy to talk with you, and I'm
Thanks.
really delighted that we got to play this role where I was able to ask you questions and had you
Thank you.
respond. So, yeah,